All right, welcome into How About Wow. How did the Cowboys go from 3 straight 12-win seasons and playoff appearances to this bad just 18 months later? And how could Jason Garrett being gone be part of the problem? There's a couple of tie-ins there. We're going to talk about that and how the Cowboys get out of it. Take it away, Jimmy.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Welcome in. I'm Gavin Dawson from 105 through the Fan. With me, as always, my main man, New Bear Lesniewski. How the heck you doing here tonight, buddy? Oh, no, you muted yourself. How the heck you doing tonight, buddy?
You called him the clapper in the run-up to tonight's show. And I kind of forgotten, maybe mental blocked, just how ridiculous, especially some of the players, and especially in the years after he was no longer the head coach, just really hated that.
Yes. Oh, and it drove fans crazy. Like, hey, we're always going to be encouraging and trust the process. And his scheme sucked. His urgency sucked. In his mind, he was doing what he had to do to manage a very different kind of situation, being head coach of the Cowboys, but it was maddening and it went on for way too long. And then, of course, he went to the Giants and proved to everybody that wasn't paying attention just how bad his offense was. So please, I don't want Jason Garrett back, okay, before you jump in the comments and start banging on me for that. How About Wow brought to you by Bet Online, up to $250 in free bets if you use our sign-up link in the description. Fastest payouts guaranteed, unmatched game integrity. Everybody that loves to bet on sports needs Bet Online in their life. Okay, let me just jump in right here and share the screen right now. Okay, Jason Garrett, son of a scout, famously told the Cowboys to not pass on Randy Moss. That was John Garrett. They didn't listen. Jason Garrett has a scouting background, and by the time he was done with the Cowboys, he had perfected the process of working with Will McClay, the scouts, the Joneses, the front office, to deliver good players. 4 or 5 players per draft were being harvested by the Cowboys, and after struggling with injuries early in his coaching tenure, they became one of the healthiest teams around football year in and year out, and they benefited from that for the early days of Mike McCarthy. But the last couple of years, the injuries have really piled up, and since 2021, the Cowboys have lost amongst the most Pro Bowlers and All-Pros to miss games, and it's continuing. I didn't realize it was like this. Katie Drummond, Cowboys Wire, salute to him for posting this story. 10 players are currently injured for the Cowboys just 3 weeks into the season. Josh Butler is one of them. He was actually hurt last year. Then Kalen Carson hurt in training camp. Jonathan Mingo hurt in training camp. Cooper Beebe, week 2 injury. Revel, they drafted injured. One of the things Jason Garrett did is he ended up targeting the most durable players in college, and it paid off. Perry and Winfrey, I don't think that's any sort of reflection, just a bad luck back thing. Overshown, chronically injured. Tyler Booker, that's bad luck. I thought he was going to be solid. He never missed games at Bama. That's just some bad luck there with the ankle late in the game. I don't even know if he
he played the whole game, and then all of a sudden he's out for 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. That sucks.
But then, Deron Bland and CeeDee Lamb, and those are going to happen. Like, there's no team that stays healthy in football. So I think there's a bad luck factor to that for sure. But, the other part of this equation, New Bear, and it's crazy to be reminiscing on Jason Garrett because we wanted him gone for like the last 5 years of his career. And now that he's finally gone, I think we're starting to get a different perspective on what he was able to do. And we go to the Twitter account actually of 1053 The Fan, and we go to the Twitter account of Brandon Laurie, one of our favorites from Blogging the Boys. But this was Wolchuk talking about it in the Cowboys post-game show. Over the last 5 years, since 2020, the Cowboys have taken 25 defensive players. Only 10 of them are still on the roster or ever even any good. And then Brandon Laurie dove into it even further. From 2018, they've drafted 20 defensive players in rounds 1 through 4, and he's got them all listed right here. Just a ton of disappointment. And only 2, Diggs and Parsons, have been named to the All-Pro team. So the other piece of information I think that's unique here StreamYard keeps switching where we are. There we go. Now we got the right name tags. The other thing with the situation with the Cowboys that's quite unique is they incorporate their coaches into the draft process more than any other team. There's a couple that are close. Seattle, which, by the way, has not been good at it since really a decade ago when Pete Carroll was plucking all those defensive backs out of the third day of the draft. They were on a heater. The Bengals, who always lack depth. Bill Belichick with the Patriots, who failed in the college draft year after year after year and had to be a genius in trades and free agency to continue to remake that team around Tom Brady. But the Cowboys do it the most. So what we're seeing now in retrospect over the last 5 years, Mike McCarthy from the Green Bay Packers, where they trusted their front office more than anybody, and they worked independently. He arrives at the Cowboys, and it's like, hey, buddy, time to help us draft. And kind of blew up in their face, along with some real questionable picks from Dan Quinn as well.
The thing that really stands out to me when you go back over time is the number of guys who almost literally did nothing on their NFL timeline. You know, I'm not saying that any 7th round pick is a guy you're going to count on, or every 6th round pick is going to turn into Tom Brady. We all know that story at 199. I mean, Mooch drafted a guy who's a goat farmer, right? I mean, the Brady 6, Giovanni Carmazzi. You know, picks don't work out for any number of reasons, but the thing that really stood out for me when you go back to, you know, I know he took over interim in 10, but 11, you know, he hits with Tyron Smith, who's probably a Hall of Famer. And then you go through the rest of that draft and you go Bruce Carter, DeMarco Murray, and then a bunch of guys nobody remembers.
Dwayne Harris.
Yeah, but you remember that because you're there and you're deep in the weeds. But Dwayne Harris is a guy you remember. That's a wide receiver who caught like 80 balls in his whole career.
Yeah, again, no, he was a good role player, special teamer, but he was great in the run game. That's why Dwayne Harris was a hit, and it ultimately got paid from the Giants.
Right. And then, you know, the very next year is the Mo Claiborne situation. And then that whole draft in 12, Tyrone Crawford, Wilbur, Johnson, Cole, like there's that's almost
just
like
okay dudes
punted on a draft. You know, I mean, Tyrone Crawford had 25 sacks in his whole career. That's a 3rd round defensive end, right? And that's what I'm saying is like there are guys who maybe had a pick or a sack or a handful of tackles or catches. But I mean, there are dudes when you talk about, you know, you've talked about Gavin Escobar, you know, the point that you brought up about the injury stuff is fascinating.
RIP, by the way.
Absolutely. And not speaking ill on that. And I'm just talking about the data and the facts as you go on a little, you know, Football Reference deep dive. There's guys in the, not just 1st round, not just 2nd round, not just 3rd round, but, you know, when you look at 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's discount 7 taking flyers on punters or, you know, truly developmental quarterbacks or some, you know, 6'5" corner who could be a unicorn, but, you know, is coming off this injury or played at this school or however you get to where you get at the end of the draft. There are so many misses where you're talking about halves of classes or whole classes that just didn't do anything, not just for the Cowboys, but for anyone.
Yeah, you know, and it was tough. Like his first 4 or 5 years actually mimic what Mike McCarthy's 4 or 5 years were, where at best you were getting 3 players that were either kind of starters or depth pieces, or you would consider it a hit considering where they took them. I mean, 2013, Travis Frederick, but then Terrence Williams and JJ Wilcox, I'd call that a 2.5. 2014 started to get better, but still just 3 players with Martin, Tank, and then the linebacker Anthony Hitchens, who took about 2 or 3 years to even be pretty good. And then in 2015, like Byron Jones, Randy Gregory, Damian Wilson, maybe that's a 2.5 or just a 2. Maybe Randy Gregory and Wilson only count as a half each because of availability issues or just quality issues. But once he had the years and they had perfected the process, and Will McClay did not step into his role as sort of the referee of the draft, helping the front office, the scouts, and the coaches get on the same page. Will McClay did not enter that role until 2014. starting in 2015, like I just mentioned, it was an okay draft. But then in 2016, I got 5.5 dudes. Zeke, Jalen Smith, who actually had a Pro Bowl year. I don't know to what extent you want to consider that a hit because he wasn't close to the player that he was supposed to be in college. I think he was playing on one league. I think he managed to have an NFL career with drop foot. So, I don't know.
Hey, let's not forget that dude might have been the first pick of the draft if he doesn't have that crazy injury.
But they get Malik Collins, who crushed it the other night for Cleveland again. Anthony Brown, who was a good corner. Kayvon Frazier, who was a decent safety and special teams player. So anyway, from that point until the end for Garrett, he was getting 4 or 5 plus dudes per draft, and the team was healthy. And as a result, they went on to the best sustained success they've had this century here in the short aftermath of Garrett moving on.
Well, and let's not forget that 16 put a lot of sugar, a lot of cherries, a lot of lipstick on top of a lot of cakes, a lot of pigs. Like Zeke and Dak help you forget a lot. And the excitement around that and the fact that Dak's about to become, statistically the greatest, I'm not saying best, but greatest Cowboys quarterback to ever do it. And they got him in the 4th round and no one expected him, let alone having the type of career that he had, but to do it from day one, stepping in at the end of Romo's run. And you can't do anything but applaud them for having a 4th round pick becoming, the best quarterback statistically that you've ever had. And Zeke, you've talked about the warts on maybe having a little bit too much fun on his way out of the league and losing the midriff a little too soon and how that plays. But what I was going to say was you started to kind of steal one of the things that I was looking at, where how many of these dudes are you looking at where they're now playing really well for someone else?
Yeah. And that's been a problem as well.
Lewis
is like overpaying or overvaluing your own guys and letting quality walk out the door. And they've had to let a lot of quality walk out the door. And, specifically over the last couple of drafts, 2023 is just overshown and he's hurt. I mean, you go Taco, Schoonmaker, overshown. And then in 24, Guyton, who might be an average starting left tackle at the absolute peak of his career if he hits his potential. Pretty good in the run game, but man, he's getting blown by. And then Beebe is maybe an average or slightly above average center. I guess that's a pretty good pick. And right now, Tyler Booker looks good. I think hopes are high for Ezeraku and Revel as well. So, I think that might be the biggest thing to look forward to with Shoddy is how does this draft do? How does the next draft do? Because one thing he has really changed immediately with this personnel preferences is he wants more physical players. He cares more about the middle of the defense than any Cowboys coaching staff that I've covered as far as defensive tackle, linebacker, safety. And, maybe that's Matt Eberflus's influence as well. But then he's looking for guys that love football. And I think the biggest place McCarthy failed is looking at traits and assuming all these guys, they got the intangible factors. They're going to, live and die to hit their peak. And, maybe hadn't shown that they were actual good players in college. They were just kind of betting on the measurables that they'd thrown out there.
It's funny that because one of the guys that I was just thinking about was Dowdle. And I was thinking about him because I was thinking about Pollard. And I was thinking about him because I was thinking about Jordan Lewis. And I was thinking about the secondary. And I was thinking about, this running game before Javonte Williams proved that he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. And one of the things that's going to be critical going forward, because they signed some of these guys. I mean, you start talking about the contracts, whether it's 1.337, right, for Miles or 3 for Javonte, and then these guys become expiring guys. Like the thing that I'm going to be really interested to see the way Shoddy is going to use it is when you do hit, whether it's a 6th round draft pick or a free agent that you're paying pennies on the dollar, what do you then do? What is the decision-making process when you hit and they win? When you look at injury history, when you look at pedigree, when you look at production, and then at the same time, how are they using them on that timeline? Because, for example, if you're going to say Javonte Williams is like a flip a coin guy because of what he brings to the table with the knee and the Holy Trinity and everyone kind of thinking he was washed. Well, if that's the case and he hits, does he become a 300 plus touch guy where you get everything you can out of those $3 million? Or are you trying to protect him a little bit because you see he's still young, he's still got tread, and he's a part of the future? Like, some of these conversations become not just like dead cap versus starting lineup type of depth piece money, but like, then how do you go into that following draft and attack the guys who are going to come in and compete with the guys that you got cheap and won, or the guys that you got Pickens for a 3? And there's all these, basically yin and yang, because it's either character, it's injury, or it's a combination of all those things, both on and off the field, that give you pause. So how do you then determine how you're going to pull the trigger?
Yeah, and I think that adds just another great layer of complication and depth to this conversation. And it goes to just the general idea of, do you want your scouts to scout and pick the players and then tell the coaches, hey, here's some players that match your scheme well, go coach them up, right? Or do you want a collaboration? The Cowboys have chosen collaboration. And for those unfamiliar, how did we get here? The
chosen, by the way. Chosen, by the way.
Am I misconjugating words here?
Well, it's actually like, how do you shoehorn? What's the opposite of pulling someone off stage at the Apollo with the cane? Like, it's how do we force our way into this room to not let Jerry, be draft free agent, kingdom of doom?
Okay, so I mean, part of the problem with taking players for your coaches and giving to them and saying, hey, go be good, is what happens when those players aren't good. Now, as a GM, you have chaos in the halls. You have the coaches mad at the scouts, and the scouts telling, screw you, coach them up better. We want calm waters around the Cowboys. Jerry Jones does not have time to have a bad time. That's one of his favorite Jerryisms. And people initially thought that meant, oh, he's going for it, he wants to win. No, what it means is he just wants a calm work environment. And one of the downsides on the collaboration is you don't get guys who are kind of at each other's throats ever with like an iron sharpens iron. You don't have coaches pointing out that your scout screwed up and you need to fire his ass and bring in his buddy from his last stop who's a way better scout. I genuinely believe that through that adversity, everybody gets made better because the standard is high. Instead, we want to sit around singing Kumbaya and everybody being friends. And Jerry Jones doesn't have arguments between the scouts and the coaches to officiate. He doesn't have time for it anyway. He's too busy investing in real estate and oil and gas and energy and stuff like that. So that's just one of the downsides as you look at the ripple effects of this strategy. Now, there's some benefits to it. In 2014, the Sharif Floyd draft, the scouts wanted Sharif Floyd. The coaches wanted Travis Frederick. And all hell broke loose on draft night, and the scouts were super pissed. And Jerry said, I don't want to do this anymore. So Will McClay again came in to officiate, create consensus. And he's got, the best scouting eye in the building as well, or as good as anybody. So he can definitely share his own opinions. But here's where I'm getting at, where this thing really starts to cut deep. As you were just talking about a few minutes ago, who do you decide to pay? Well, if you're a coach that has vouched for a guy and he's busting on you and you like this guy and you swore to everybody up and down, your job's kind of on the line. So as he's failing, what are you going to tell everybody? Oh, this is a lost cause. Get rid of him. No.
Right.
Now, after you've worked with him for 3 years, New Bear, you love him. You've been telling Jerry how he's going to be amazing for the last 3 years, and now he actually played well enough to be a starter. Terrence Steele, Osa Odigizua, so now you're going to Jerry and saying, pay this man. And you love him. You've been with this guy for 3 or 4 years. You know his family, and you love his work ethic. That's part of why you drafted him. You love his personality. You think he's a great fit, and you're biased as bleep, So your dumbass is going to go into the front office and say, oh, yeah, this guy's a player. I told you on draft night, this guy's a player. I told you when he was struggling year one, everything was going to be fine. Look at him. He deserves $18 million, Jer. And now you got freaking Hunter Lipke making $3.5 million for no freaking reason. And Brian Schottenheimer has been around here in a consultant role and an offensive coordinator role for about 4 years or so. So I'm hoping that he can be less biased towards this than Mike McCarthy, who just loved his guys. But I don't know. That's a pretty difficult bias to fight against when you have such a strong vested interest in the player's success, and then you start liking him, and you have a big voice in the decision to give him his second contract.
It's funny too, because it's like, where is the scar tissue, right? They paid Zeke, which a lot of people said don't. And you talk about tread, you talk about touches, you talk about, hey, is this dude really love football enough to eat the avocado ice cream and do the TB12 kind of stuff to play forever as well as you can? And all the whispers that became, which maybe short-circuited a Hall of Fame career. And then you don't pay your last 2,000-yard rushers, regardless of their success rate or what they're going to cost relative to the market. I'm thinking about George Pickens right now. I think it's unquestionable that he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. But what does that mean relative to him crashing out and breaking helmets on the sideline? What does that mean relative to him? I mean, look, he's got 15 more weeks to prove that he can run the whole route tree and hang on to daggers and digs and everything in between 0, 1, and 9. But so far, everything that they've asked him to do, at least consistently, unless it's go win right now, right, on the tutty that really showed you everything that he's about, or just go be special on the one-handed one where he kind of goofs around.
I don't know. The more I'm hearing, like, Pickens just he's not impressing too many people. He's got the
right.
highlight
So what I'm
catches,
saying now,
yeah.
If CD is going to be out for any amount of time and he goes off, or when CD comes back and they go on a run, I'm just talking about the counting stats. And I'm saying, like, if you're a fan, like diehard, or just somebody who loves, the NFL and is fascinated by how the Cowboys do business, whether you bleed America's team, or you're just fascinated by the reality of the TV show that Jerry admitted he's been running for 30 years. When you look at guys who are producing, and then you see them on other teams, and then you see this team with all these questions, and then you see this team maybe get lucky that they were right about Javonte Williams, but they were dead ass wrong about everybody at corner and safety, except for maybe those top flight guys who frankly aren't physically right. I'm just curious, when you talk about collaborate hierarchy or everything in between, like, what really is the decision making?
That's a great question. And I think it's Jerry taking a lot of input from a lot of different sources, ruminating on it. And then when he finally decides, or I think Stephen Jones will decide a lot of stuff as well. But that's a great segue into the next thing. And one of the problems here with collaboration is you don't really empower a visionary, a guy who has that aha light bulb moment and recognizes the next trend, because he's got to go convince 12 other dudes. And then you got to get that home to Jerry.
My favorite, and it's make-believe, and everyone wants to talk about how it could never happen in real life. But when you watch Draft Day and you hear Dennis Leary say, keep me in the loop, to Kevin Costner, and he says, there is no loop. There's me doing my job and you doing yours. My job is to give you a team, and your job is to figure out how to win with the guys that I give you. There is none of that in Dallas.
I think there's incredible momentum and adrenaline when somebody feels the power and the responsibility and the autonomy to get that general manager job done right. And I think I don't know, maybe there's a couple of other teams out there, but for most successful teams, for every successful team, either the head coach or the GM is the smartest mofo in the building, and nobody would dream of challenging his authority. And because of that, I think that's where the great visions come from. It's one dude. I just don't know how you're imagining you're going to, outthink the league by getting a collaboration of a bunch of different voices and have an oil man making the final decision.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Belichick missed a ton. Tom Brady was a human eraser. You look at what Howie Roseman's done in Philly. You take a step back and think about who like the GMs right now who are making noise. Look at what Omar Khan's done in one offseason and really in the past couple, and how they've changed the way the Pittsburgh Steelers do business. The only collaboration that I can think of, because I was just thinking about Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore, right? His partnership, if you will, with Harbaugh. I mean, ultimately, Lamar Jackson is in Baltimore because Ozzie Newsome wanted to do what Colbert thought he was doing with Kenny Pickett. You get these guys making these decisions based on legacy on their way out and based on the team from year to year along the way. But at the end of the day, it's their call. At the end of it, it's their show. It's one guy. He's a genius. He's ahead. The one that I'm really thinking of right now is like Shanahan and John Lynch. What I'm thinking about is, you have guys who grew up in the game, whose parents or grandparents with the Lombardi. Like, think about the you always talk about Nepo baby and how Schottenheimer is skirting that line and trying to prove that he's his own guy. I wonder at some point, not that he's going to, usurp Jones fam and get, GM control, but I wonder if at some point this is where he puts a stake in the ground and says, if this is going to be my team, if we're going to go forward, if this is going to be the future and we're going to exist in it in a winning way, I got to have a bigger say.
It's a great way to wrap that up, because what you have to hope is that Shoddy can bring the scouting acumen along with managing up with the Jones family to really become the guy that can, impress his vision or put his thumbprint on the organization. I believe he's got the skills to do it. I don't know about his scouting background and how much that was a part of his life along with Marty Schottenheimer. Obviously, the coaching part was. Offensive scheme was huge. I mean, he was making his college recruiting and transfer decisions based on which offensive coaching staff can I learn the most from. So absolutely. I think he's got a fertile mind. I don't think he's lazy like Mike McCarthy. I think he's got a much better eye for talent than Dan Quinn, Rod Marinelli, a lot of these guys killing more that have been through the system. And I think the good news is we got one draft. And maybe it's three guys, but hopefully three really good guys with Rebel Ezeraku, and I think Tyler Booker's at least one, and hopefully Jaden Blue can join that party or one of these day three guys. But that's the good news right now is I think maybe we've recovered from that Mike McCarthy meatball sandwich level of laziness that was contaminating the draft process.
So the one thing I'm going to say, Pittsburgh guys are tough to call lazy. I think he's stubborn. I think that there's a difference between the type of stubborn that he was and what he's loyal to, stubborn about, and Jerry and company. And when you have folks who come from completely different places, and let's not forget, Mike McCarthy won a lot more recently than Jerry. And yeah, Aaron Rodgers. And yeah, a lot of things got to go right. But let's not forget that man has a ring too. And I'm not just saying that because he's a Pittsburgh guy and I'm raising my kids a few blocks from Bill Cowher's house. I'm just what I'm really getting at is work ethic is one thing, schematic is one thing, scouting is one. All these components, right? And you talk about McClay, you talk about Jones fam, you talk about Shoddy, all these other voices in the room. What this is fundamentally going to come down to is why the same kind of thing, like why Hunter Lipke got paid. Like what is this team going to be? What are they going to look like? What is you see Kyle Juszczyk and how the 49ers use him, that's a different check because the balance of it is touchdowns.
Yeah. How do you marry your personnel with your coaching? And I think in principle and in theory, it is a good idea. But and maybe they could execute it as well as they did under Jason Garrett. But I think if this coaching staff can't do a better job than what Mike McCarthy did, hopefully in the not too distant future, they'll look at their process for identifying players and make some adjustments. But again, I do believe Shoddy's going to find success. It's just going to take a couple of years. Thanks for entertaining my view on this. If you have thoughts on it, other ideas we can discuss, leave a comment down below. If you are enjoying How About Wow, please hit that like button. That'd be huge for us. The show is brought to you by our friends at Bet Online, the best online sports book in the entire world, up to $250 in free bets if you use our sign up link in the description. For New Bear, I'm Dawson. Till next time, how about wow?